Donald Trump has issued an executive order attacking the National Museum of African American History and Culture and threatening to remove funding from programs that promote what he calls an improper ideology. After days of failing to explain why his defense secretary was texting top secret war plans to a reporter, Trump is attacking black people to distract from Signalgate. The new executive order issued on Thursday attacks national museums for interrogating institutional racism. The horror! Imagine a museum in a country founded on slavery and segregation having the audacity to explore the history of racism. This museum is one of the most popular museums in America, receiving 1.6 million visitors last year alone. Trump claims his order is designed to restore the Smithsonian to its rightful place as a symbol of inspiration and American greatness. So the guy who knows nothing about American history and thought that Frederick Douglass was alive just a few years ago thinks the only way we can celebrate American greatness is by whitewashing history and erasing the legacy of racism. So what does this executive order do? Nothing! Yep, you heard it. It does absolutely nothing except to distract from his Signalgate scandal, stir outrage from black people, and convince his white MAGA supporters that he's sticking it to the colors. The order says the vice president, in consultation with a bunch of other people, shall work to effectuate Trump's goals through his role on the Smithsonian Board of Regents. All this does is tell J.D. Vance to be an asshole on the Board of Regents that governs the Smithsonian. There are 17 members on the board, including several prominent Democrats, and J.D. Vance is just one of them, so he has no authority to make this happen. The order also says the vice president and the OMB director shall work with Congress to try to stop funding from programs that divide Americans based on race. That could have been an email or a public group chat. All it does is tell J.D. Vance to try to get Congress to cut funding for black exhibits that Trump doesn't like. The order does not cut funding for this museum or any other museum in the Smithsonian, and Trump doesn't have the authority to do so anyway. For the National Museum of African American History behind me, it's important to remember that 46% of its $81 million budget comes from federal appropriations, but most of the funding comes from private donations and general trust funds. So even if Trump and Vance convinced the Republican Congress to cut funding, we as Americans can make up the annual $37 million in potential lost funding from the government for a few years until we get rid of these clowns in the White House. But here's the kicker. The same executive order that purports to restore truth and sanity to American history instructs the Department of Interior to reinstate Confederate monuments that were removed during the Biden administration. Yes, they're eliminating black contributions to American history. At the same time, they're celebrating the most racist white contributions, slavery, and Civil War. You see, the Biden administration removed an infamous Confederate memorial here at Arlington National Cemetery and renamed military bases that had been named after Confederate generals. For those who don't remember history, the Confederates were the bad guys in the Civil War who broke away from the United States to preserve slavery. Trump doesn't like them being portrayed as bad guys. So let's review here. Trump's executive order does nothing to the National Museum of African American History and Culture except get people talking about it, which means it's all a distraction from the scandal over the Yemen attack, which itself was a distraction from the economy, according to Pete Hegseth's text message on Signal. This guy is like the opposite of Commissioner Gordon turning on the bat signal in Gotham. Whenever Trump gets in trouble, he turns on the chat signal, and all the racists in MAGA world come running to his defense.
Hello guys, now welcome back again to this channel where we get to learn from each other and also converse. Now there is this statement of Donald Trump and his stance on black history. Now I've seen a lot of reaction concerning this coming from black people, and I just want us to watch the video first, and later on after this clip we are going to have a conversation. We are going to have a discussion concerning the same. Give me your views in the comment section. I'll give you my take later on after the clip. And if this is your first time in this channel, please consider supporting us by subscribing to our channel, give us a like, and also share our content. Let's get into it first.
Okay guys, in a nutshell, I've been seeing on blogs that Trump wants to get rid of African American history in the Smithsonian. They have an African American history museum. And the answer, it's kind of complicated, but it's not. He doesn't want to get rid of the African American part of the Smithsonian. What he does want is for it to be presented correctly. What happened, they presented the concepts of a nuclear family, individualism, and hard work as white culture concepts. And he's saying that if you're going to have a museum here for whichever group's history, that's not a white concept. Anybody can be hardworking. Anybody can have a nuclear family, which is mom, dad, child, or man, woman. Anybody can have that. Anybody can be an individualist. That's not a white concept. That's anyone. And he's saying if you're going to have a museum here in America and it be federally funded, where we handing you the dollars, you're not going to be divisive and tell black people that the only people who can have, or the only people who came up with nuclear families, hard work, and individualism are white people, and that's a white concept. He's saying that's an American concept. That's what we do as the United States. That's what people aren't reporting. They're just saying Trump wants to get rid of African American history. He's also targeting the women's history part, because they are trying to include men in women's sports as a part of their exhibits. And he's saying absolutely the fuck not. If it's women's history, then it's going to be about women. And y'all already know how that man felt about that. He told you before he was elected. He told you when he was running. He told you when he got in office. I'm not standing for this and I'm totally against it. So again, let's not be shocked and act like y'all didn't know that that's what his stance was. So in a nutshell, no, he's not trying to get rid of African American history, but he wants the verbiage to be correct and not divisive to where it's saying that black people aren't apt to have nuclear families, hard workers, and individualism. So that's it in a nutshell. You might agree, you might not. Let me know in the comments. Remember to be respectful. And I will talk to you guys on the next one. Go USA. Y'all have a great day. Bye.
Why don't we talk about the time America dropped a bomb on its own people? Yes, America. This isn't fake news, it's history that's been erased. Listen up, because you won't believe how this story unfolded. Imagine a community where black excellence thrived. Banks, theaters, grocery stores, schools, all owned and run by the people for the people. This wasn't a dream, it was reality in Greenwood, Tulsa, also known as Black Wall Street. This was a place where generational wealth was being built. Families were sending their kids to college. Entrepreneurs were getting to that bag. Greenwood symbolized what was possible for black folks at a time where people tried to crush them at every opportunity. But success like this didn't sit right with everyone, especially the jealous, unmelanated folks who didn't like people with color. And in 1921, those tensions literally exploded. Here's how it started. A young black teenager was accused of moving to a white lady.
No one knew if this was true, but the word spread.
A white mob formed and saw this as an opportunity to tear up the town. When black residents stepped up to defend the teenager, things spiraled out of control. What followed was one of the most horrifying acts in U.S. history. Mobs stormed Greenwood, lighting up homes and businesses. But it didn't stop there. Planes were used to drop bombs on the neighborhood. In America, over 300 black citizens, including children, were turned to ashes. Thousands were left homeless. And 35 blocks of thriving businesses, culture, and dreams were turned to ashes and dust in less than a day. And it gets worse. But first, drop a light bulb emoji in the comments if you're learning about this for the first time. I'm curious to see what schools are teaching. Also, make sure you like and share this video. Here's the part that really hits. No one was held accountable. No arrests, no reparations. Survivors were left to pick up the pieces with no help from the free country and the pigs. And to make it worse, this story was buried, left out of history books, ignored in classrooms, erased from the national narrative. Why? Because it challenges the American dream, or should I say the American myth. The myth that this country has always been fair, just, and equal. Stories like this expose the truth, and the truth is uncomfortable. But we can't ignore it, because history has a way of repeating itself. And if we don't learn from it, then the same defeat will get us. Black Wall Street wasn't just about wealth. It was a shining example of what black folks could accomplish, even in a system designed to take them down. Its destruction wasn't just about jealousy. It was about fear. Fear of what black unity and self-determination look like when left unchecked. Greenwood was a threat to the status quo. We need to keep sharing these stories, because the more we understand, the stronger we become. Next time, we're diving into another chapter of hidden history, and it will blow your mind.
Well, they're coming for the museums. We knew this was going to happen. We warned you this was going to happen, and voila, here we are. In case you're not aware of what's going on, Trump recently decided he has beef with the Smithsonian because it is too woke for him, and of all institutions, the National Zoo in Washington. So he went ahead and signed an executive order to eliminate, quote, improper, divisive, or anti-American ideology from these centers. Now, the BBC is asking a very, very important question here. What exactly is anti-American? Well, the answer is whatever this administration decides is anti-American today. For example, Jackie Robinson, literally the most American person I can possibly conceive of. His article on the Pentagon's website was recently removed, and they are attempting to ban his biography from naval libraries. Jackie Robinson, an American hero. Of course, this is only one of 900 books that they're looking into banning. The others include the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr., and another American hero, and Einstein's On Race and Racism. And today, March 31st, 2025, the Institute of Museum and Library Services had their entire staff put on leave quietly. And if you're not aware of what this institute does, basically they are responsible for a lot of federal funding for libraries and museums. This is fascism. It's fascism.
All right, y'all. He is absolutely coming for our Blacksonian. There is no doubt about it. He specifically name-checked the National Museum of African American History and Culture in his latest executive order. Everything we feel about that is justified. If you are sickened, outraged, sad, incensed, all of it is legit. Because we know why he's coming for us. We know what our history teaches people. And we also know it is dangerous to be a people with no memory. But I always want us to remember, that's not us. Our history, our memory doesn't exist because of that building. That building exists because we were wise enough to preserve our memory. Every single artifact in that building exists because somebody thought enough of what we created and we built and who we are, thought enough of generations yet unborn to preserve the memory. Against all odds, against all threats, our ancestors and our elders thought enough of us, generations they may never see or know, to keep the thing, to hide it under a floorboard, to whisper a story in secret, to pass the word in a newspaper we owned and printed, even when those offices and printing presses got torched, to preach it in churches, even when those churches got bombed, to teach it in schools that we created and funded, even when they came to shut those schools down. Somebody was wise enough to sing the memory in coded language and then record it in somebody's basement. Somebody was wise enough to write the family tree of the family we weren't supposed to have in the front page of that Bible, to plant the memory on somebody's field, to cook it in somebody's potbelly stove, to photograph it on somebody's hand-me-down camera, to paint it on bits and scraps of paper. Somebody was wise enough to style the memory on somebody's chest, to braid it into somebody's scalp. Somebody was wise enough and thoughtful enough and loved us enough to read and write the memory, even when reading and writing it meant almost certain death. All of these things were how we preserved memory when there was no museum, when there was no Netflix special, no Oprah's book club selection. It was dangerous work, and yet we knew it was necessary and righteous for the sake of a future of a people. Black people's memory has mattered long before we ever had a monument. And preserving that memory has preserved us. Those blueprints are how we got over. That's how we survived. That's how we sustained for generations in abjectly hostile territory. Our memory is how we built a future for a people that were supposed to be wiped out by now. A present for a people who were always supposed to be past. Our survival was supposed to be an impossibility, but instead, African people, chained and enslaved and ripped from their motherland, took the memory of that place took the memory of our many languages and faiths and tribes and traditions and family structures and ways of being and values and created a new people in order to be protected and to persist. African American is a whole new creation based on the memory we preserved. That's who we are. So now more than ever, we're going to have to act like we know who we are. We are going to need those blueprints to survive, and we're going to need to preserve the memory we're creating now to build the future we deserve. So I'm not saying we shouldn't be outraged. We should. I'm not saying organized outrage doesn't work. Y'all know I believe it absolutely does. I'm not saying we shouldn't protect that building and everything in it and everybody in it. We absolutely have to. And we should always know our memory and the things made up of it made us a worthy people before we ever had a monument to ourselves. So we got to act like it. We're going to have to be the reason why we never lose a recipe. Now's the time, y'all. I love you.
There is a new Trump executive order that charges the Vice President J.D. Vance with eliminating, quote, anti-American ideology and anything that he finds to be, quote, improper from the Smithsonian. And of particular note here, the executive order names the Smithsonian Museum of African American History as well as the Planned Museum of Women's History. What's going on here?
Well, with a stroke of a pen, they are deciding what is deemed to be fully American and what is deemed to be anti-American. And they're going to have a fight here. You know, there are a number of people who are very proud of the Smithsonian, very proud of the way the Smithsonian has widened its aperture to tell a fuller story of America. Because the story that we tell ourselves as Americans is important. And it's important that it is a full and complete story and reflects the histories, even the difficult moments in history, but reflects the histories of as many people as possible. Now, the Smithsonian gets about 62%, specifically the National Museum of African American History and Culture gets about 62% of its money from the federal government. Mm-hmm. The museums are, you know, when he targets the National Museum of African American History and Culture, that is a very successful museum. You know, it opened just a few years ago. More than 197 donors raised $297 million to make sure that they were able to open the doors, and a much, larger number of smaller donors. So when they start to narrow the story that is told, it's bad for America in terms of the history that we tell ourselves. It's bad for the Smithsonian also in terms of the way it opens its doors and how it conducts business. If people don't see that institution as something that reflects their story also, maybe they spend less time there. Maybe they spend less money in those gift shops. Maybe we don't see the Smithsonian being the gold standard for museums that it has been over many years, and most particularly recently, as they started to tell a broader, richer, wider, more full and more accurate story of American history.
The Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are right now, they are trying to gut Medicaid and Medicare programs on which nearly a third of our country rely, all to pay for those tax cuts. They're also dismantling the very institutions meant to safeguard our nation's health and well-being. That's why I'm going to stand here and explain to people what's going on and how our healthcare programs are at risk and being undermined. This is about right or wrong. It is wrong to take away healthcare for millions of people.
It looks like Trump's just now openly using the authoritarian playbook and is targeting the Smithsonian and National Zoo for anti-American ideology, with him signing an executive order that instructed J.D. Vance to eliminate improper, divisive, or anti-American ideology in the Smithsonian museums and the National Zoo. He also ordered the Interior Secretary to restore statues, memorials, and parks that were changed or removed in the past 5 years to what he called a false revision of history, which means they're putting Confederate statues back up, with the order also saying that Congress should not fund Smithsonian exhibits that, quote, degrade degrade American values and divide Americans by race. And then he singled out the National Museum of African American History and Culture as being problematic. Right? So you have many saying that it's hard to see this as anything but an authoritarian attempt to rewrite American history, with historians saying that one of the first things that authoritarians do is rewrite the history of their country, and this because it helps them control thought. Right? If people believe a certain version of the past, they're more likely to behave the way the regime wants in the present, because once objective history is compromised, the truth itself becomes relative and manipulable. Stalin would remove political rivals from photos to erase them from history. Adolf rewrote German history to create this Aryan fantasy and erase Jewish contributions to Germany. Mussolini rewrote the Italian experience in World War I to fuel nationalism. Putin rewrote Russian history to justify the invasion of Ukraine. And I mean, in 1949, George Orwell wrote this book based on Stalin's USSR called 1984, and in it, he writes, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." And in 1951, Hannah Arendt warned of the same, saying that authoritarian movements thrive on destroying objective truth, confusing people, and manufacturing alternative historical realities. Right? So in taking all of that together, it's why you're seeing so many experts saying this is a very critical moment right now. Follow to stay in the loop.
Okay, I want to take a moment to say thank you to Donald Trump, not out of praise, but out of truth. Because while you rip through every part of this government, tearing down justice, equality, and fairness under the fake excuse of fighting DEI fraud, what you're really doing is confirming what black folks have been saying for generations. America was built on racism, fueled by fear and sustained by white supremacy. You've exposed it all. The masks are off. The polite racism, the fake allyship, the colorblind lies, it's all gone. Now we see it raw and unfiltered. You're not just targeting policy, you're targeting people. Black people, brown people, marginalized communities. And the wild part, we make up the smallest portion of this country, yet somehow we are the biggest threat to the lie that white supremacy built. That should tell you everything. You're afraid not of violence, not of replacement, but of the power we hold even when we have nothing. You see the way our culture, our brilliance, our resilience, our excellence continues to shape this country, even when it tries to erase us. Donald Trump is just the loudest version of a system that's always been in place. He is the living, breathing proof that this country was never designed with us in mind. And yet, we continue to define it. So thank you, Donald, for exposing what so many tried to deny, for showing the world that the fear of black greatness is real, for proving that racism isn't in our imagination, it's in the fabric of this nation. And to my people, we don't have to fight to prove our worth. He's doing that for us. All we have to do is stand firm, stay awake, and know that the truth is finally louder than the lie. We are not broken. We are not the problem. We are the evidence of the power that this country can contain. Let that truth ring louder than its hate.
Hello, welcome back again. Now, Donald Trump's stance on black history, particularly his opposition to critical race theory and diversity-focused education, is a part of a broader effort to suppress the truth about America's racial past. And you know, this push to issue executive orders against the teaching of black history is not just about politics. It's about erasing the painful yet essential lessons that define the black experience in America. From slavery to Jim Crow, from the civil rights movement to present-day racial justice efforts. This history is not just a collection of events. It is the foundation of the ongoing fight for equality. And how can he do this? How can he take away the efforts of the blacks? How can he do this? How can he take away the efforts of the black? It is never fair. It is not fair at all. To deny this teaching of black history is to deny the truth of America's past, because there is no America without blacks. The reality is that systemic racism has shaped every major institutions in the country, from education to criminal justice, healthcare to housing. Trump's attempt to block this education is not about protecting students from division. It is about maintaining ignorance without understanding history. How can we as a society move forward? How can we move forward? You you have to know where you're coming from for you to understand where you're going. So if these teachings are taken away from the faces of the black students, then how will they know, how will they approach the problem of racism without the knowledge of the past? Tell me. And teaching about figures like Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, and Angela Davis is not about making people feel guilty. It's about ensuring that the mistake of the past are not repeated. Let them remember, let them be kept reminded of the past so that they cannot repeat what has ever happened in the past. When Trump and his supporters claim that discussing racism is divisive, what they really mean is that they are uncomfortable with accountability. So how are they going to be kept in check if people are ignorant? Tell me. For black Americans, this attack on education is a passion. The ancestors of black fought to learn to read and write when it was illegal. They risked their lives to access schools that were intentionally underfunded. They marched and protested for a fair and accurate education that included their stories. Now it is the 21st century. We are seeing a new wave of oppression disguised as a policy. Trump's executive order is not just about schools. It is about controlling the narrative. If black children grow without learning their history, they are more vulnerable to internalize oppression. And as well, if white children grow without learning the truth of the past, they are more likely to uphold racist systems. So, if you look at it, it is both beneficiary to both of them. And guys, beyond the classroom, the erasure of black history has real consequences. It impacts policy making, public opinion, and justice. When people do not understand the roots of mass incarceration, they assume black criminality is a choice rather than a product of systemic oppression. When people do not learn about redlining and discriminatory banking practices, they believe the racial wealth gap exists because of laziness, not a structural racism. Education is power, and that is why Trump and his allies fear it. They know that a well-informed population is harder to control, harder to manipulate, and harder to keep oppressed. So this is not just about Trump. It's about a long history of white leaders attempting to silence black voices. From book bans to school curriculum restrictions, America has always been uncomfortable with the truth about its racist foundations. But one thing I want you to know is that no order can erase the truth. Black history is in our DNA, in our music, in our art, in our communities. So black people, keep on pushing. Keep on pushing for justice. Keep on pushing for equality, for equity. And now the ball is on the court of the black. The question now is whether people will stand up, resist, and ensure that the next generation has access to the knowledge they deserve. I don't know what are your views concerning this, but let's continue having a conversation in the comment section. This marks the end of our session today, and if this is your first time in this channel, please consider supporting us, man. Subscribe to our channel, share our content, give us a like. Remember that we are strong together. Let's remain united. Let's support each other. Let's love each other. That's how we are going to make it. That's how we are going to emerge victorious. Hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.